Do you ever feel like everyone else knows how to code except for you? You've watched the tutorials, you've done the homework, but when it comes to getting your own project off the ground, you end up staring at a blank page for hours. You don't know how to get started, and you're not even sure you understand what you need to build. You might feel like a failure, but the fact is that even professional web developers get stumped. The trick is understanding what to do when you do get stuck, and that's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to build this light-dark toggle from Mentor, and the catch is I don't know how to build it. But that's okay because we can break the problem down into smaller chunks and research our way to a solution. By the end of this series, you'll not only be able to build the toggle yourself, but you'll have a process you can use to figure out almost any web dev problem you can think of. Sound good? Well, let's get started. Alright, so when I'm starting a project, before I do anything, before I jump right into the code and start typing away, I try to take a look at the project and kind of figure out what requirements are going to be part of this and what things I would have to build. Let's pretend that this project that I'm building or that you're building, this Front-End Mentor challenge, is something from work. And what's really cool about Front-End Mentor is that they're actually giving you almost like a real-world experience in terms of getting a design from a designer and then having to build that out, because that's basically what I've done as a web developer at my job, or my former job rather. So let's look at the Front-End Mentor challenge. So we're doing the social media dashboard with Theme Switcher. And if we click into here, we can see, the desktop design. It has a series of cards and it's showing data from the different social media platforms. And then on the bottom part, there is some more cards showing, different engagement metrics. And then, of course, at the top right, we have this toggle for dark mode and light mode. And we can see here that there is both a light and a dark mode version of this website. So what I like to do usually is write down what the functional requirements of this project are going to be. This is really very similar to what I would do in the real world. So I'm just going to create a new file here, call it notes.md. So this is going to be functional requirements and notes. And, obviously this is just a casual note-taking thing. Let's kind of zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, so functional requirements and notes. So the dashboard has a light and dark mode toggle. So we're going to have to do a little bit of research in terms of, what is the correct markup to use in HTML. So what HTML markup to use, as well as how to switch between light and dark mode. And I believe we're using CSS variables. So that might be another item that we're going to list out here. So CSS variables or custom properties, which is I think their formal name, but it seems like a lot of people are just saying CSS variables like myself. The light dark mode is kind of the reason that I chose this challenge. It's something that I'm not super familiar with myself, so I thought it might be beneficial to just show you the seedy underbelly of building websites and all the research and Googling that is involved, as well as trial and error. So just trying to keep things, honest and open around here. So here's the brief. Challenge is to build this landing page, get it close to the design as possible, which is definitely important. The only JavaScript required is for the color theme toggle. Users should be able to view the optimal layout depending on their device's screen size. So, desktop versus mobile versus tablet. And then hover states, and then toggle the color theme to their preference. So that's pretty straightforward. One thing I did was I actually tweeted about building this project, thinking about doing this dark light mode switcher challenge in Front-End Mentor. So I said I haven't built one before, so there's probably gonna be some live Googling or DuckDuckGoing since I use DuckDuckGo. So let's see, I got some pretty good replies with good suggestions from people for things that I need to keep in mind when I'm building this out. So that's Matt, he makes Front-End Mentor. So this person is saying CSS custom properties are the simplest native way to do it that I know of. Declare the theme properties at the root, which is what I've heard too, and then apply a class to the body or use a prefers color scheme media query to override them. Okay, so prefers color scheme media query, that's something that we're going to prefers color scheme media query. So we're gonna have to look that up. And then, okay, so everything else I kind of know, use the root thing. Okay. So let's see. And then I got this other tweet from Grace Snow. She's actually a really active member of Front-End Mentor. She's very experienced. So one of the challenges I see most commonly is using poor HTML semantics, not just for the toggle. I actually think the HTML in this is a way bigger challenge than the theme. So I was asking like for the dashboard. So she was saying where the headings should be. Should usernames be labeled with screen reader only text? Will the increase, decrease of followers be communicated to assistive text? Okay, so let's look back at the design real quick. So where the headings should be, I'm guessing that is for, making sure you're using the correct H tags whenever possible. So I'm guessing here, social media dashboard would be the H1. And then I'm guessing the overview today would be an H2. And then each card would probably need an H3 tag. So, page views, likes, etc. And the other interesting thing she said was, should usernames be labeled with screen reader only text? This is an accessibility thing. So if, say, you are visually impaired, you might be using a screen reader to navigate the internet. And that means that you need websites that you build to be able to be navigable by screen readers. So they'll actually read out loud to you what the content is on the website. So if we look at the design, for example, on the first card here, it says, Facebook and then the Facebook username, Twitter with a Twitter handle, etc. for the different platforms. And if you're visual, you can see the Facebook icon or the Twitter icon and you know what platform this card belongs to. But if you have a screen reader, it's not going to say that. So what I'm assuming Grace is saying here is that we can add some text that's only going to be, readable by the screen reader, but it's not going to visually appear on the page to say, for example, Facebook, Nathan F, or Twitter, Nathan F, things like that, just to make things more accessible, for screen readers. And could do the same thing with the bottom cards, like, page views on Facebook or likes on Facebook, likes on Instagram. So things like that are unfortunately oftentimes the last thing or even just forgotten. And I'm as guilty of this as a lot of other people are. And accessibility is something that I'm trying to get better at. So we'll try to keep these things in mind, and let's make some notes on that as well. So accessibility. Is that right? No, I think there is 2 S's. Like when you look at a word and you look at it for so long that it starts to look weird. That may or may not be spelled correctly. Okay, so accessibility, make sure headings, use correct heading tags. And then screen reader only text for, card titles, username. So just things to keep in mind there. And then another thing we actually might need to research is the toggle itself for accessibility as well. So dark light mode toggle. What HTML markup, accessible. We'll go into that a little bit later. So let's go back to the tweet. Let's see. CSS variables, someone else says. And then at the bottom, this is from Killian Volkov. He makes the Polypane browser, which we're actually going to be using later in this video. So he's saying extra credit if you had a third system default option. So a third option to the toggle. So let's check out his blog post here. Okay, your dark mode toggle is broken. So let's see what he's saying here. So do you need a toggle? Do you really need a toggle to support dark mode? Not really. You can support dark mode by using the prefers color scheme option, which that other person mentioned earlier. So that's another note to myself that this prefers color scheme is probably something that is accepted or a best practice. And we'll be researching that later. So it gives you, built into browsers, it gives you one of 3 values, light, dark, and no preference. Okay, so here's the issue. The issue or the problem here is that most toggles have 2 states. You either have light mode or dark mode, and then the choice is forever stored in a cookie or local storage, which could break your dark mode if, if I'm guessing you've set in your browser or your OS, you prefer either light or dark. So this is saying that the toggle actually needs to have 3 states, light, dark, and system preference, which is what the user sets on their own computer. And then there's a prefers color scheme media query. So this is mentioned again. Okay, so what I'm getting from this is that the toggle actually, so switching between light dark modes via JavaScript, and then 3 option toggle, light, dark, and then system preference. And that goes into the prefers color scheme media query. So this looks pretty good so far. So, we're just making a list here of all the things that we're going to be doing research on in a little bit. Okay, so I think, and then this is an example of Stack Overflow giving you these 3 options. All right, awesome. So I believe that was all for the tweet. So now we have the items that we need to research. We're just going to kind of go down the list. So the first one is the light dark mode toggle. So what I need to figure out is what HTML markup do I need to use and how to make sure it's accessible. So if we go back here, so Grace Snow actually did a challenge on Frontmentor, which I did find in my research, and it's linked here. So an accessible toggle in HTML, CSS, and JS. And this is for this other challenge, which is a pricing component with toggle. So you can see that here. And she made some notes here using an accessible component from this person, Scott O'Hara, styled form controls. So let's check that out. Okay, accessibility of styled form controls. So I know a little bit about this. Basically, your form controls are like the checkbox, the radio buttons, form text boxes, things like that. And what people sometimes do when they're styling them to make them look prettier is to, instead of using the actual radio button or something, they'll just build one using a div in CSS. And that's not navigable by screen readers, and it's a bit confusing because you're not using, the traditional HTML form elements for that. So what I'm guessing this website is telling you is, and let's load the actual website here. Okay, so this is the website. Zoom in a bit. The accessibility styled form controls. So what I'm guessing is that this person, Scott O'Hara, has created, HTML and CSS markup that you can use if you want to have these accessible form elements, just as a starting point. So what we want is to figure out the markup for the toggle. Okay, switch checkbox, toggle button. Let's see what this is. Okay, so this does look like a toggle. However, keep in mind we do need to use, I think we need to use a radio button list because this button, I believe, only has the on and off settings. So I think we need this one, switch radio button group. Pattern to create a 2-option radio button group. Okay, so there you go. This is the toggle, it's working. And there's some notes here. Okay, so here is some example code, which is pretty awesome. So we can see here there's a field set, which sort of encapsulates the different controls. And then there is, yes, so for each option, there is a radio button input type. So this is probably what we're going to be using. Now, if you remember from Killian's blog post, we actually need a 3-option radio button toggle. So this example just has 2. And I need to figure out, is there a 3-option toggle? Is that even possible? So when I am looking for some examples of UI elements, a lot of times I'll just go to CodePen. So CodePen. And we're going to look for toggle, maybe 3, and then just hope something pops up. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so no. Oh, here we go. CSS multi-position radio switch. Okay, perfect. So what I'm really looking at here is an example for, what I can build that I can use as a reference. Okay, so there's 2 positions, 3, and even 4. That's pretty funny. Cool. So we'll probably do something like this. So my guess is I would make the middle position the system default, and then maybe light on the left and dark on the right. And we'll have the default be the default. And let's just check out their markup really quick too. Looks like they too are using a radio button input, which is good. So that's another sign that, this is kind of the way to go, in addition to obviously seeing it here, and I believe, and then also with Grace's challenge here. So this is just good to know. We might need to come back to this to see how they style the 3 positions, because it has this nice sort of animated thing. So we can kind of go back to this when we need to. So I'm going to take that link. So here we go, light dark mode toggle, 3-option toggle. We're just going to add a link here, and then the HTML markup. We'll copy this thing here, just so we can go back and make sure we're following what that's saying. So now we have the radio button toggle markup research complete. I think I have enough references that I can work from this later on when we're actually building. So let's move on to look at using JavaScript to update CSS variables. So I use DuckDuckGo, update CSS variables with JavaScript, and let's see what happens. A lot of times I will just click on the first result here, but I also try to kind of filter the results based on if I know a website is considered, a good source of information. And I haven't heard of designsize.com. I'm sure there's a reason it's coming up first, but I look at CSS tricks a lot, so let's check that out. Okay, updating a CSS variable with JavaScript. So CSS variable up here. So you set the variable, it's mouse-x and then mouse-y. Okay, so here's some code examples, how to update it from the JavaScript. So we're going to say let root equals document element. And then to that document element, here you go. So root.style.setProperty. So this is probably what we would use to update the CSS variable. So this is good to know. I guess switching between light and dark modes via JavaScript. So maybe for under CSS variables, we'll add a list link here. Let's just add some spaces between these to make it look a little bit better. So that's probably right. Now just for kicks and whatever, let's see what this first result tells us, and we can compare what this result is telling us with what the CSS tricks link was telling us, and just see if they match up. It's another sign that this is probably the best approach. Okay, so style set property. Okay, so this is again saying you want to set it on the root pseudo class, which is what everything else we've read is saying, so that's a good thing. Okay, so this looks pretty familiar. Document element, style set property, which is, they created this root let variable, or I guess just let, it's not a variable anymore. So root style set property, and they're saying the same thing here. So that tells me that this is a good approach to use. So the other thing I think I need to research is, doing some research on light and dark modes, just because I want to see how we need to sort of format the colors. So let's say light dark mode CSS variable. See what comes up. Okay, so create a dark light mode switch with CSS variables. Dev.to is, I think, pretty good. Obviously, your mileage may vary depending on the actual author. So let's see what this person is saying. Okay, so adding custom properties. Okay, so this is root, primary color, setting it to different things. And then data theme dark. I have not heard of that. And I believe that people had mentioned this prefers color scheme media query. So maybe I'll copy this and do light dark mode prefers color scheme. Maybe delete the mode. So light dark prefers color scheme. See if we can find some examples here. Okay, so developer.mozilla.org. That's usually a pretty good source of info. Prefers color scheme CSS media feature is used to detect if the user has requested a light or dark color theme. And this is similar to what Killian's blog post was saying. So let's see. Okay, so they have a code example here. Okay, here's what we're looking for. So in the CSS, there's a @media rule, and it's saying prefers color scheme dark, and it has a set of colors using the dark scheme class, and it's setting the background to dark gray and color to white. Okay, and then there's another @media prefers color scheme light, and then that's using the light scheme class, background white, color, it's like a medium gray. Okay, I'm actually curious to see. One thing that Killian had mentioned is that you can set this in your OS or your browser. Interesting. Okay, so the no preference. You mentioned no preference, I think, but it's not really, it's only supported in Safari. Not really supported in anything else. Ooh, simulate prefers color scheme in Firefox, which is what I'm using. Okay. So I guess what I'm curious about is, like, I haven't really set the color scheme thing here, but I believe I can set it in Windows. In display, let's make this window a bit bigger. I believe it was under color. Oh, dark mode. Here we go. So under colors, choose your color dark. So if I change it to light, what happens? Ooh, everything turns light. Interesting. I'm actually curious to see if that affected any of these web pages that I was looking at. Okay, so here we go here. Let's change back to dark and see if this changes at all. Oh my gosh, it did. So the day and the night changed. That's pretty cool. Changing the color, light versus dark, will sort of use this prefers color scheme value. So what I think I want to do is going back to the challenge. So right now I have my operating system set to dark mode. If I just load this website, I want it to use a prefers color scheme media query and detect that I have dark, which is kind of what they're saying here. So prefers color scheme dark, like that. And then if I'd set it to light, then it would switch to that without having to actually do the toggle. But my guess is then the toggle works because, let's say I have my thing set to dark, but if I want to load this website in the light mode, if I change it to light, then it can change to light even if my OS mode is set to dark mode. So that's what I'm guessing is a good UX. So, you know, if I'm wrong about this, feel free to flame me in the comments. So let's write a little note on that and how that all works. So light dark mode toggle takes system preference by default, but can override with toggle. So this is just kind of a note to myself. Okay, so then the switching between light dark modes via JS, I need to add the link that I did for that. So we'll just copy this. Did I not do that before? Oh yeah, I did. Oh, I did just the updating the CSS variable, but I didn't add the link for this thing, prefers color scheme and how that all works. Maybe I'll move this up here too. So it's switching between light dark modes via JS and prefers color scheme media query. Okay, cool. So I think that's pretty good for the dark and light mode toggle stuff. So the correct heading tags, I think I know enough to just add the correct headings. And the screen reader only text for cards and titles and usernames. So let's look up that. Screen reader only text. Okay, so accessible360.com. That sounds pretty good. Okay, screen reader only text is great for providing more context to a link whose purpose may be obvious visually due to its location, but could be confusing without visual cues. So this person is adding some additional text to the add to cart button, saying, you know, info about the product, and it's adding a class, screen reader only. That's interesting. Okay, screen reader only, position absolute. Interesting. Another thing I tend to do when I'm looking up stuff is, so I don't know a lot about accessibility, so let's look up here, accessibility developer guide. Let's see if they, you know, they seem like a pretty authoritative source, right? Okay. So let's check out their website. Welcome to the accessibility developer guide. Nice. Okay, so this is a good sign. The content is based strictly on the W3C's web content accessibility guidelines. Okay, looks pretty good. So let's see what they got here. So I'm just gonna go right to the example section and hiding elements. Since we're probably gonna add some text that we only want to be readable by screen readers. This is probably what we're gonna use since we want to have some text that's not visually visible on the page, but it is readable by screen readers. Cool. Okay, hiding elements visually. We don't want to hide elements from screen readers, so we want this thing. Hiding elements visually by moving them off screen. Okay, cool. There's no official technique for this, but there is a well-proven workaround. So the only way to hide an element visually while retaining its perceptibility for screen readers is moving them out of the viewport using absolute positioning. I think that's similar to what that other example was here. Yeah, so they're doing absolute. Looks like they're also using clip path. I don't know if that is actually supported by all browsers. This seems like maybe it's a more straightforward approach. So basically, this is actually a good example. So I would take what this website is saying over this website because, I mean, this seems pretty good, but it just seems like this is like kind of a blog. You know, it looks like they're some kind of agency who handles accessibility, and I'm sure they know their stuff, but I think this clip thing is just not supported as universally as just, you know, position absolute. So this seems to be a little bit more of a simple example. So we're going to copy this. Screen reader only text for card titled username, so we'll add that link there. Okay, so this is good. And this seems like a pretty cool website, so just for the heck of it, let's see forms. I just want to see what kind of markup they recommend. Let's just look at the general good form example. So radio button, this is what we're going to be using. Radio buttons, input type radio. Okay, that's good. And then each group of radio buttons and checkboxes has a surrounding field set legend structure. So this is something good to keep in mind for the markup. Let's kind of go back to that example from Scott O'Hara. So field set and legend. Okay, cool. So it seems pretty similar. So it's another vote in terms of, you know, this using the radio button list for the markup. Screen readers. Okay, in addition to the controls label, so each radio button will have its own label, screen readers also announce the legend of the surrounding field set. Okay, so they have an example on CodePen. Let's just check that out. I'm just kind of curious what the legend is for. I don't see legend here. Oh wait, here, legend. Hobbies. Let's just kind of scoot stuff over here. Okay, so the legend said hobbies. So where is that? Okay. Oh, so it's sort of like the title for the set of radio buttons. So my guess is for the toggle, I would do something like set the legend field or the legend tag to say dark light mode or theme, maybe something like that. Something that's kind of just descriptive of what, you know, what's the purpose of these radio buttons, and then to make that only visible, only readable by screen readers. So that's good to keep in mind. So I'll make a note about that because I don't want to forget about the legend thing. So add that to the dark light mode toggle. Here, HTML markup. I guess I'll just make another note here. Use field set, legend, and then radio inputs. Okay, so I think that's all the notes I needed. So I think we have everything we need to go from here. And that's how I'd turn a challenge that's out of my comfort level into a manageable project. Remember, it's okay to not know everything, and there's almost nothing that a bit of hard work and research can't fix. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like so more people get a chance to see it. And if you want to be the first to find out when the next video in this series drops, don't forget to turn on notifications. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed watching the process of web development, I have another series where we build an entire website from scratch using HTML and CSS. Or if you're completely new to web development, take a look at my roadmap video where I lay out the important steps to starting your journey into the field. And lastly, a very special thanks to my GitHub sponsors. Your support directly makes these videos possible. You all rock. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.